Hello and welcome. The goal of this podcast is to get listeners connected with others in the sports industry because they say it's all about who you know, and now you know us. All right, welcome everyone to the Constant Sports Podcast, where we connect you with the movers and shakers in the sports industry. I'm your host today, Connor Shank, and we have David Taylor joining me. And David is the 49th guest on our podcast slash show. So exciting number, almost to big number 50 there. So we're excited to learn a little bit about David, his journey in being an entrepreneur in the sports, kind of fantasy sports industry. So David, how about we just kick us off with kind of, what maybe a little bit short background, kind of elevator pitch on what you've got going currently.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I would say, I've always had a love for sports. But honestly, to as far as season long fantasy was never really something that I was into until I discovered the daily fantasy.
Mhm.
And that really intrigued me. And, like many others, I'm sure that discovered daily fantasy, they thought, hey, I'll get in and figure out the numbers and, get an advantage or everything.
Yep.
And then you learn pretty quick when you get into one of the big platforms like DraftKings that there's people that's been there a whole lot longer than you that have already had it figured out. So uh when I learned that, which, hey, that's good for them, but there is a lot of sharks in the industry, and uh that's kind of what started gearing my mind towards something different with Goat Draft.
Yep. Awesome. Good to hear. And then, so for the listeners and viewers, Goat Draft is the fantasy sports platform that David and his team are creating. And so I guess that, a little bit kind of brought us into where we're at now, but was there a specific moment that you can go back to, like you can pinpoint kind of that sparked your interest, or is it just kind of, like you said, kind of getting into the industry?
Yeah. Um, it actually started, I was trying to build a system to, help me pick a team to get an advantage. And over time, that just kind of ended up taking on a life of its own and kind of became the idea of Goat Draft. And I started building on that. And, looking to bring something new
Mhm.
for novice players, to give them kind of a fair chance to win on a more simplified platform. I would say that would be more my inspiration behind it.
Got it. And then walk through the viewers, maybe kind of a high level of what Goat Draft is, what maybe what how it started, and then kind of how it morphed to, where it is now.
Yeah, it started with a phone call to a childhood friend, my business partner, who was kind of a tech guy,
Mhm.
and kind of wanted to gauge with him, like, how crazy are we to embark on this journey, for one. Uh, then at that point, we ended up driving to Dallas to meet the legal team, and that kind of is where we started the framework of the company.
Yep.
And then at that point, we just started building our initial team so we could begin development. And after a year and a half, everything was ready, operational. We beta tested it, but because it took a little longer than we expected, we were a little short on funding.
Mhm.
So uh, it ended up being pretty good timing. I ran into a friend of mine that's been a friend for 30 years. He just had a new business partner. He's like, hey, let me talk to my business partner. He may be interested in funding it. Long story short, a few conversations in, the investor he was excited. He was like, yeah, I definitely want to do it. He goes, but I'm going through a divorce. So there's going to be, I won't have the funding available till October. So I was like, hey, no problem. He goes, if we started something now, my ex-wife would be your business partner and you don't want her as your business partner. So I said, no, I can understand that. So at that point, what we did is we went ahead and turned everything off in July of 2023, just so we could wait for a proper launch in October. Unfortunately, um, in September of that year, the investor ended up passing away. So that kind of left us, devastated, at a loss, like, what do we do
Mhm.
from here? So it was shortly after that, I really started networking, reaching out to people, finding people that were interested in the project. And we ended up finding great people, that would add strength and validity to our team. And I feel like we're more prepared now than we were, 6 months ago, for sure.
Yeah.
So,
And that's I guess the business, the name of the game, I guess you got want turns and twists and things. And you've been in the, the entrepreneur kind of business space for 20 plus years now. So it's, I guess maybe for the listeners and viewers out there, how is your, I guess, business style and or kind of leadership style evolved as you've gone on in your career?
well, I would say like in my early days, I was much more hands-on because the business that I ran, I had the skill set to do everything within that business.
Hmm.
And so, being more hands-on and rigid just for the day-to-day operations. But over time, working with Goat Draft, there's a lot of the work that's being done on Goat Draft is work that requires a special skill set.
Yep.
So I have learned and adapted to, trust my team more, to delegate effectively, and convey my ideas in a more clear and concise manner.
Hmm.
Because I mean, I understand the importance of a team, and the strength of your team will have a big impact on how successful you become. So
Yeah.
I would say that's the
I like it. And then that kind of leads into one of my other questions is when, and this could kind of almost be reverse engineered for someone looking for a job or looking to get hired is when you're building a team or finding the right partners and business ventures, things like that. What are some, I don't know, some skills, some things that you look for when you're building these teams that, the listeners and viewers can kind of hang their hat on, like, okay, I can get good at this or I can get at X, Y, and Z.
yeah. I mainly look for people within the space, that have experience in that particular field.
Hmm.
Um, so kind of what I do to kind of stay on top of my game is just, continuous learning
Yeah.
and, adapting and holding myself accountable as well.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm always looking for ways to improve, whether it be, networking with other people in the industry or, staying updated on the market trends. Uh, but at the end of the day, I always ask myself, what did I do to take a step closer to my end goal?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, it's kind of the one step at a time, build,
Yeah.
brick by brick type of concept, and it's the long game, as they say, is and I guess in the kind of the sports tech kind of dive into that space, sports tech, fantasy industry. What are your kind of thoughts on where you see, maybe it evolving fantasy sports in the next, 5 to 10 years?
Well, I think right now the lines between fantasy sports and betting are currently blurred.
Mm,
Um, you know, I believe the laws will continue to evolve and maybe help unblur them lines. Um, but I also believe we'll see like innovation that'll make, fantasy sports more accessible to casual players. And that's what Go Draft intends to do. It'll kind of broaden the audience and bring something new to the industry.
hmm. No, I like it. I like to hear. And then I guess for those that are maybe interested in the sports tech space specifically, are there certain, I know you mentioned the, kind of the two different worlds there, but are there other kind of maybe sports tech scenes or places that you could see pop up, esports, for example, something along those lines for the listeners and viewers to kind of keep an eye on?
Yeah, for sure. You know, I would say like, as far as the challenges go in when you're in the startup in the tech space,
Hmm.
it would be like navigating the regulatory landscape, especially in the gambling and fantasy sports space. We knew coming in that that would be one of the biggest challenges
Hmm.
is, so that's why we started with legal. I'd say the next biggest challenge is something that most founders find themselves is, looking for proper funding.
Hmm.
Um, and in this particular space, I think it's in some ways even more challenging because investors that are unfamiliar with this space tend to be a little more apprehensive
Yeah.
on uh, getting involved because of the stigma of the gambling space. And that's why we seek out a strategic partner that has over 30 years of experience in the gambling, casino, and daily fantasy space to kind of help ease some of that, and bring some more validity to Goat Draft
Mhm.
when we are looking for investors.
Right. And I guess not kind of we're on the topic, but I've had a few, I guess, smaller agencies, you could say, business people coming on that are always, I feel like, interested in the influx of capital and money and things like that. And with your experience when looking for investors, obviously, as you touched on, the experience is going to play a big role, the time and the space and things like that. But are there other things that you look at for when you're trying to when you're pitching your company to investors or trying to get an influx of capital?
Like, well, one of the things that they usually ask is, what makes your game different?
Hmm.
So I get into that. I met a guy for coffee a few weeks ago who's a CEO of a uh pretty big company in this space, in the
Hmm.
gambling space. And that was one of the things that he asked me is, with all of a lot of the current companies are, prop bets, parlays, that kind of stuff, and we're geared more toward the traditional fantasy where it's player versus player.
Hmm.
And he's like, so, what makes you go that direction as opposed to where everybody else is? And, I was like, that's a good question, but, you know, Goat Draft brings even more to the table than just traditional fantasy. There's a lot of gamification that's going to go into it as well, that's going to make it different than anything else that's out there. And that's why, you know, I'm I'm not deterred from the fact that it is different than what's everything out there. I think that's much more of a selling point
Hmm.
to it as well. So,
Agreed. And it is maybe you can touch on a little bit, but as you see the sector growing and evolving, whether it's the prop bets, the team versus team, the player versus player, um,
mhm.
what are your thoughts on kind of each of those spaces industry for kind of the casual, I guess, better you could say.
uh, well, I mean, it's evolved so much, with mobile technology. There's so many different apps and stuff that are coming out there, and I think that there's a really strong emphasis on like real-time data that
Hmm.
people want them instant results. Like when they see somebody score that touchdown, they want to look on their phone and they want to see their numbers change. So that's super important. That's also one of the bigger expenses in this industry is having that sports data, you
Mm,
know. So that's kind of a monthly cost that can drain the coffers if you're not being, if you don't have the proper users. So,
right.
but with like I said, a lot of the people in the industry are focused more on the prop bets and parlays, which I like that we're bringing it back more to the traditional fantasy,
Hmm. Yeah.
player versus player, and we have a big community aspect built into it as well. We refer to them as herds. A lot of you join a league and Goat Draft, you join a herd. We do a
Yeah.
lot of playing on the
I like
goat
it.
itself. So,
I like
but
it. The greatest of all time. I like it. It's good. Good move there.
yes,
I like the logos.
greatest on any team. That's
Okay, there you go.
that's part of the concept is we don't have salary caps, so you can literally take the greatest on any team.
All
So
right. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing more
yeah.
about it as we get along. And then kind of as you talk about the future and different things with Goat Draft, what does kind of success look like for you both personally and then also for Goat Draft in the long run?
Oh, let's see. Success for me would be, just creating a platform that stands out in the fantasy sports industry and that offers an enjoyable and unique experience for the players. Uh, Personal success would mean, knowing that I've built something that's meaningful
Mhm.
and that does have a positive impact on the industry. And, for Goat Draft's long-term success would be to have it viewed as being a very trustworthy and having integrity as well. So,
No, beautiful, well said. And then as you've kind of built out this app and as you become, founder and doing day-to-day work, is there obviously you've hit setbacks as you alluded to in the very beginning, but what's maybe a setback or challenge that you were not anticipating as you've been building this out?
yeah, I mean,
All the
setbacks
above?
Yeah, but they're part of the journey,
Hmm.
I've learned to view the setbacks more as opportunities to reassess and improve. And I would say the biggest learning experience with GoDraft has been understanding the importance of being patient and
Hmm.
resilient. I mean, we faced a major setback when the investor passed away just before we were ready to launch. And, that forced us to regroup and kind of rethink our approach. And so instead of giving up, I use that time to network and to build new relationships and to, strengthen our team.
Hmm.
And, that experience taught me that, perseverance is key. And sometimes delays can lead to better outcomes if you can just stay focused and push forward.
Hmm. Well, and it kind of goes back to, maybe plan A doesn't work, so you're going down plan B, and then that takes you
Right.
down a whole different, rabbit hole that you were probably not anticipating going down.
Right. Right. Yes. Plan B, I always try to have a plan B, but there was not a plan B for the investor passing away.
Yeah,
That was just something that,
unforeseen, obviously.
it's just like, now what do we do? But we've got back on our feet and I've got some really promising things uh just over the last few days that's came up that I'm, fingers crossed, things are looking good. So I hope to be able to bring, Go Draft to life and share it with everyone
Mhm.
in the very near future.
Yeah,
Is
no, yeah, we'll be looking forward to that, and the viewers and listeners can follow along now that they're familiar with Goat Draft and the future success we'll have. But as we wrap up, I was getting curious about when you're, I guess, staying up on industry trends. Are there certain spots or places go for, not advice, but maybe information or trying to stay ahead of the industry?
um yeah, I mean, I'm always looking to learn, and kind of watching kind of what everybody else is doing. And I mean, that's just, be a student of the game, I
Mm-hmm.
would say is something I always try to do.
Yep. No, I like that. And I think always learning, as we've touched
Yeah.
on earlier, is very important to always just try to pick up some information, and that it never hurts. And as we approach the NFL season, do you have any NFL? I don't know, who's your team before we wrap up? Is there anyone you're watching out for?
I'm a big Denver Bronco fan,
Okay.
honestly. Um, I live in Oklahoma. A lot of people in Oklahoma are Dallas Cowboy fans, and you in here you either love the Dallas Cowboys or you hate the Dallas Cowboys.
No in between.
So no, there's really not any in between. But I'm a Denver Bronco fan. I have been since I was about 7 years old. So, it's we had our good times, but it's been rough for a while. I'm kind of excited to see what Bo Nix can do.
No doubt.
Um, I'm it's looking like he may end up being the starter, so I'm kind of hoping, you know, uh, kind of see what happens there. Who's your team?
I was a San Diego Chargers fan, and then they left to LA. So I'm a nomad currently. Don't have a
Uh-oh.
team. Just free out there in the world until someone sparks my interest.
There you go. No, I'm a fan of sports in general.
Yeah,
Uh, I tend to like I'm a huge college basketball. Like that's my
that's your
love right
jam.
there.
Uh-huh.
And what I started doing in college basketball is following more coaches.
Mm.
I'm big fans of coaches because players come and go, especially in college and
Right.
especially with the transfer portal
Yeah,
now.
college basketball. Yeah.
Yeah, it's nuts. So I become fans of certain coaches and I just kind of follow them. But I mean, I live in Oklahoma. I'm an OU fan. I got season tickets to the OU games. So, but I kind of follow everybody in college basketball, and it's vacation time when March Madness comes for
Oh
me.
yeah. Yep. I'm
That's
with you.
yeah.
Was as I was curious, kind of now that we're on the topic a little bit, as far as kind of the sports betting industry, whether it's or fantasy, whether it's NFL, NBA, off the top of your head, do you know, like, do people bet on more NFL games than NBA or MLB or college basketball?
NFL.
NFL's okay. I mean, I
NFL.
know that they have the highest media and things like that in most viewers, but I was curious if because I just feel like there's a little bit smaller sample size with what is it, 17, 18 games plus playoffs, whereas college basketball, MLB, you got hundreds of games, obviously.
Right. Right. Yeah. College sports are probably one of the lesser played. I enjoy it.
Hmm.
I always try to, I actually got lucky. Um, my biggest win on DraftKings was actually in college football.
Okay.
And, I won a, me and another guy had the same team and we won a $15,000 pot. So we had to split it. But that night I ended up winning 10 grand and
It's a good night.
checked and my house at the time was almost paid off. I owed like 7 grand on the house. So I was like, hey, let's make this real. So then the very next day I withdrew it and paid my house off. And
Okay, look at that.
when you do that, then it's real easy to convince your wife that, when you're sitting in front of the computer trying to pick your team that, hey, there's real money here. So, that works for a little while. And then, when you don't continuously
Yeah, you got to hit more. You got to hit more frequently.
yeah,
Now that's the
yes,
game plan.
when the inconsistencies start, that kind of wears off. It's like, yeah, you were lucky.
Of
But
course, of course. It's a fun, good story though. Well, as we conclude, David, is there anything you want to leave the viewers with, or where they can find your site or whatnot, or where they can follow along?
hey, anything, if anyone has anything that they feel like they can contribute to Goat Draft, whether it be, in any kind of collaborate, you know, collaborate on something, or, you don't have to be an investor. If you have anything that you'd be interested in, you can just reach out to David at goatdraft.com and I'll be happy to, set up a talk or whatever. So,
Perfect. Well, yeah, you heard it here first from David. So, if all those listeners and viewers out there, make sure to reach out to David if there's something that piques your interest and you feel like you can add value or collaborate in any way. And this has been another episode of the Constant Sports Podcast. Thanks everyone for tuning in and watching. And to learn more, obviously, connect with David, and you can find this episode on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, anywhere you get your content. Thanks again, David, for joining us, and we'll see you later.
all right. Thanks, Connor. Appreciate it.
Yep, appreciate it. Have a good one.